Some of the young people might be wondering what on earth she was walking out to. It's an 80s track called 500 Miles, but the claim is you might know it because Peter Kay kind of did a version of it. Why did I walk out to that? Well, I was explaining to my table briefly, I was a game maker during the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games, and I had the dubious pleasure and honour of working on the track team, which meant during the Olympics particularly, I had to put all the hurdles out and make sure they went out in the right time, right place. And it kind of almost had a dance routine to it because we all had to do it in synchronicity so we looked pretty on TV. So we used to sing this in our heads as we did it because it kind of worked for the pattern. So if you can imagine, you've got loads of adults walking like that. So then we had to pick up the hurdle and turn, and put it down and turn. And it was all pretty. But it wasn't what I expected when I brought into it. And you can imagine work taking the mick out my full end when they saw this little dance routine I had to do. So I have to admit, I got the phone call and thought, why on earth do you want to listen to me talk? We've got all these researchers and medical people who are like really, really important. And I guess the reason why I'm here today is a small event that happened in London last year, just to remind how brilliant it was, and to save me talking as much.
And we will never think of disability the same way.
These have been, quite simply, amazing Paralympic Games.
Made in Britain.
We had Sebco saying about how the games have made a difference. It's easy to say the games made a difference when it was in the middle of London in the summer and we all had a heat wave and a bit of a feel-good factor. It has actually started to make a difference though. Sport England's invested over 10.2 million in the first round of the Inclusive Sports Fund, which went to roughly 50 products across England to increase participation in disability sport. Sport England fund 46 sports to help grow participation. Specifically now, 42 of them have got specific targets and specific funding ring-fenced to include participation in disability sport. Research from Learn Cheshire, Scope and ourselves as EFDS has found that 72% of disabled people thought the games had a positive change in attitudes in the way they're treated in society. And kind of more importantly for us, because Sam all about the sport bit, 7% of disabled people are interested in doing more sport and activity. But it's great people are interested, we've kind of got to change that into actually people doing, which is not always the easiest thing. So, who on earth is this EFDS, English Federation of District Sport, and what do we do? Well, the straplines was in my introduction. Our aim is to try and get disabled people active for life, and when we say disabled people, we've got a really long-winded explanation of it. We do research and insight, not medical research, but we do a lot of work finding out what disabled people actually want, because traditionally people assume rather than ask, and we find asking works much better. Resources and tools, fact sheets, case studies, all those sort of things. We do online toolkits, so sports clubs can work on how to be more inclusive, etc. We work with national governing bodies. Sports owned by these mystical organisations called national governing bodies, so England Athletics, England Volleyball, etc. And we work with them to help them make their offer more inclusive, because they have significant money and significant workforce and significant delivery. We don't try and duplicate anything. And we work with some organisations called National Disability Sport Organisations. And they're very much impairment specific, so there's organisations such as Limb Power, Wheel Power, work with specific groups, and again I'll mention them later on. And we have something called the Inclusive Fitness Initiative, which I'll mention later on, but essentially it's about making gyms and leisure centres more accessible and more user-friendly, both from their equipment, but also from staff training. We also run a number of events, which I'll mention later. So, but that's enough about me. You don't want to know what I do. You want to know how you can get involved in sport. Now, what was really interesting, I was going to kind of go through the why you should get involved in sport, because there's been research done by Macmillan, Clatteridge Research Unit, their cancer survivorship programmes. But I noticed you had this Update magazine, which really handily has an article in from your Irish counterparts and has 10 reasons why you should do sport. So you can all go pick one up in reception later and read 10 reasons why you can do sport, because that will save some time and hopefully get us back on schedule. Or possibly not, because I'll waffle too much. So how can you get involved? I've mentioned the IFI. I've put leaflets regarding the Inclusive Fitness Initiative on everyone's tables, so you can fight over who has them. But essentially we've got over 450 gyms across the country. If you go onto the EFDS website, you can stick in your postcode and it will tell you where your nearest site is. We've got reasonable coverage with 450 sites, but if you find your gym near you isn't inclusive, have a word. Mention it to your local leisure centre, because if people know there's demand to improve the facilities in their area, then people suddenly get interested, because we support leisure providers in improving their facilities and equipment. Also, key thing to remember is a lot of the work we do isn't necessarily about finding Paralympians, so don't worry, going to the gym is a great first step. Not just for anyone who wants to get into sport and fitness later on, mums, dads, we all know we should be doing more physical activity to make us healthier, so it's a great first step. How to find a sports club or session. This is the one area where all our research says people find it the hardest thing to do. And that's not just about disability, it's about anybody. Finding a sports club to go to, people find quite scary. Well, the first place to look is your national governing body. So what sport is it you fancy having a go at? Because most governing bodies will list where their local clubs are or how you can get involved in semi-informal structures. There's a lot of sports now offering sessions where it's not about being in a club and being competitive, it's about going down to the local leisure centre, picking up a badminton racket and having a knock around with some mates. They call them posh names like No Strings and Get Back Into, but it's about just having a laugh with friends and family and doing sport. A couple of NGBs have sent some flyers down with today. Wheelchair basketball, which are a very popular sport, and had actually a couple of bone cancer survivors in their 2012 team. And sitting volleyball, again, they had bone cancer survivors within their 2012 team. But they're quite interesting as a sport because at their participation level, their makeup's basically 50% disabled people and 50% non-disabled. So there's lots of brothers and sisters playing together, friends and family. Another source is the Parasport Club Finder database. It's funded by the British Paralympic Association, hence why it's called Parasport. And again, you can look in by postcode and find out what Paralympic sports and Paralympic sports clubs are near you. I say Paralympic sports because the Paralympic sports aren't the only sports available to you. There's a wide range. For example, it won't feature things like disability cricket or golf, for example, because they're not in the Paralympics, but they're still sports open to you. Or at a local level, there's these random organisations called county sports partnerships that lurk and exist at a county level. So in this neck of the woods for Leeds, it's West Yorkshire Sports. Think of whatever your county is, type it into Google County Sport Partnership and their website should pop up. They're funded to help connect people into local sports opportunities, so they should also have local club websites, data, information, and if they haven't, ring them up and they'll know the man who can. A lot of sports about signposting. And the NDSOs, again there's a leaflet about the NDSOs. They can provide advice and support on how to get involved, and they're really good because they're impairment specific. They've kind of got a little bit more expertise and knowledge and can answer those questions you think are quite silly but aren't really. So there's a massive list up on there. Limb Power and Wheel Power are two key ones that run their own events and programs as well. So they do taster sessions, activities for young people, which you can get involved in. And that's one way of getting involved. Limb Power have got a primary and junior games at Stoke Mandeville Stadium in October. It's really well attended, load of NGBs there, there's loads of sports you can try. Limb Power website has more details, and Kira at Limb Power I'm sure would answer any queries any of you may have. Paralympics, GB runs Sports Fest. There's roughly 4 a year. We haven't got the date for the next one. If you're interested, again, check out our EFDS website. We list all the events across the country at a national and regional level. Also, mention local authorities and county sports partnerships. They will also run local things, but very much kind of town specific. Anyone fancy Rio 2016, thinking they're going to be the next Paralympian? Believe it or not, I got this stat from UK Sports, so I might get it wrong. I think it was over a quarter of our medalists wasn't even playing sports 4 years before London 2012. They were found within the cycle. Disability sport's a little bit random in that you can go from kind of zero to hero incredibly quickly, partly because people don't realise they're actually any good at sport. They just keep playing in their club and their community and then not realise they could be world champion. There is currently a talent identification programme going on by UK Sport called Bring On Brazil. The website's listed there. It's open until August the 23rd. They're particularly targeting 16 to 36-year-olds. They've done the stats on why that's the prime age group we're aiming for. And if you've got any kind of sporting background, they kind of want to hear from you. The process itself is really supportive in that it essentially starts off with a few emails. You'll then get sent to a talent ID day where they get to do some tests on you to see how physically and superior wonderfully you are. And then they'll signpost you what sports they think you have the best potential on. Or if you haven't actually got medal winning potential, they'll signpost you what sports you can have the best fun at. Because it's about keeping people involved. Now I got asked to mention about classification during this talk. Classification, I'll be honest, bores me. It's one part of our sport that people get really hung up on. But it's not new. Classification is just about ensuring fair competition. It's no different to having weight classes in boxing and judo, or splitting males and females. There's two phrases you'll come across regarding classification. Profiling, used very much more at grassroots and in non-Paralympic sport, and it's basically a type of functional toolkit that looks at what the person can and can't do. The stickmen are actually examples of the profiling toolkit, and you get given a number, and if you're in the same number group, you can play sport together because that's you guys, and another group will play sport together another way. Classification works in the same process, it's what's recognised by the Paralympics. It's a little bit more medical model in its approach. But essentially, if you want to get into sport, do not worry about classification. It is not the first thing to worry about. Find what sport you want to do, get into it, and enjoy it. Your sport will be able to explain how and when you need to undergo classification if you want to be competitive. Not everyone wants to be, and I don't expect everyone to be. If you do go through classification, it usually has two parts. It's got the assessment part, which is the medical bit, and it's usually a trained doctor or physiotherapist. It's nothing to worry about, it is literally just checking you are what you say you are and you're not making it up. And observation, how you train or compete in that specific sport, because we want to see how it affects you in a sport-specific environment. My speciality is learning disability sport, and that section actually is them genuinely checking you're not making it up. Learning disability sport got barred from the Paralympics after the Sydney Games, after several journalists went into the Spanish basketball team and pretended to have learning disability. It didn't go down so well and took about 12 years for us to get back into the Paralympics. The tests those guys have to go through are quite arduous as a result. Now, I mentioned our events programme. I just thought I'd finish off a little video of our events programme and how it works to kind of show you it's not all about Paralympians, it is about young people and how you can get involved. Apologies, it was for our sponsors, so there's a lot of people live around me.
there's no difference between us.
I train all year round for all types of events. This is the big one of the year, but I train all through the year and I've set targets when I want to peak, when I don't.
This is where I first came as a little youngster, when I was 9 I think it was. It's really good that Nationwide sponsored them because future Paralympians have a chance to raise people with disabilities like them.
The media has definitely sort of grasped disability sport for the last couple of years, definitely. And that's the good thing about sport, it brings everyone together, which is what the Olympics did and what the Paralympics did.
Without the sponsors, you wouldn't get the competition. And without a doubt, if we didn't have the sport nationwide and everyone who supports with the DSE, we wouldn't have no Great Britain Paralympic team that did as well as it did.
I would never be where I am today if it wasn't for races like this. And obviously the people who support events like this.
Take chances. Take the opportunities wherever you grab them. You never know what's going to happen. Don't get nervous. Just enjoy it.
So yeah, I guess just finishing with what the video said, getting into sport or back into sport after anything is nervous for anyone, but just go for it. What's the worst going to happen? Thanks for listening to guys and girls. I'm around for the rest of the day. If you've got any questions, feel free to call me.